How do migratory birds find their way? Now, let's start by exploring the history of migratory birds. Evolution of birds. Early theories about evolution of migration were summarized by Cox in 1968 and Gotherex in 1982. The northern home theory, which assumes that due to climatic changes, birds had to shift their non-breeding activities away from high-latitude breeding grounds. The southern home theory, which assumes that bird migration evolved in tropical species that started to breed at higher latitudes. Evolution of bird migration is the sense of maintenance and modification of migratory behavior and not the first appearance of migration in evolutionary history. Avian migration is a regular endogenously controlled seasonal movement of birds between breeding and non-breeding areas. Migration always includes two trips, from breeding grounds to non-breeding grounds and back. This definition does not include foraging trips during the breeding season. Migration was often interpreted as a result of birds escaping intra-specific competition during the breeding season. Connecting links between reptiles and birds. Archaeopteryx. Connecting link between reptiles and birds. It looks like birds has wings, teeth and tail are like reptiles. This shows that birds have evolved from reptiles. Archaeopteryx had many non-avian theropod dinosaur characteristics. Now let's see the difference between birds and reptiles. Birds are warm-blooded whereas reptiles are cold-blooded. Heart is 4-chambered in birds. Heart is 3-chambered in reptiles. Body is covered with feathers in birds. Body is covered with horny epidermal scales in reptiles. 2 forelimbs of birds are modified into wings, whereas in reptiles, the body is divisible into head, neck, abdomen, and tail. Bird character of Archaeopteryx. Presence of feathers. 2 limbs are modified into beak. The 4 limbs are modified into wings. The hind limbs are built on the typical avian plan. An intimate fusion of skull bones as seen in the birds. Characteristics features of birds. One familiar characteristic of birds is their feathers. Feathers help birds stay dry and warm, attracts mates and fly. Birds share many characteristics with reptiles. Like reptiles, birds are vertebrates. Birds also have many unique characteristics. For example, birds' eggs have harder shells than reptiles' eggs do. Birds can use heat from activity in their cells to maintain a constant body temperature. Birds take a good care of their feathers. They use their beams to spread oil on their feathers in a process called preening. When feathers wear out, birds replace them by molting. Molting is the process of shedding old feathers and growing new ones. Most birds shed their feathers at least once in a year. Anatomical features of migratory birds. Birds' lungs. A lot of breathing power is taken during flight and the bird's body adapts itself to give it an extra puff. Extra large breathing system to 1/5 of the space in its body. In addition to their lungs, special air sacs are seen within the hollow bones for easier flow of gases around the body. A big heart. Flapping requires more energy. To keep the flight muscles working, blood must move quickly around the system. For this, the heart is comparatively powerful and bigger. Heartbeats of smaller birds are faster than big birds. Skeletal system. Less weight. Presence of hollow bones. Lightweight beaks instead of heavy teeth and jaw bones. More strength. Rigid skeleton. Main limb bones are hollow with special struts inside them for strength. Muscle support. Breastbone holds the huge muscle of flight. Adaptation and modification of birds. Birds are the only amniotes whose bodies are highly specialized for aerial mode of life. To fly in air, they possess some specialization in morphology and anatomy. Morphological adaptation. Body contour. Body of birds is fusiform or spindle-shaped to minimize the resistance offered by air during flight. Body covering feathers. The feathery covering makes the body light and protects from the hazards of environmental temperature. Forelimbs modified into wings. Forelimbs have transformed into wings, which are the sole organs for flight. Beak. The transformation of forelimbs into wings is duly compensated by the presence of beak used for feeding, nest building, and defense. Anatomical adaptation. Flight muscles are well developed which control the action of wings. The wings are depressed by pectoralis major and elevated by pectoralis minor. Lightness and rigidity of endoskeleton. The skeletal framework is lightly built on the hollow girder principle. Digestive system is well developed. Rate of metabolism is very high and digestion is rapid. Undigested waste is minimum and is immediately got rid of. Respiratory system of birds is specialized in such a fashion that the food is combusted rapidly and completely to liberate large amount of energy. Components of feathers. Feathers are necessary for flight, insultation, and courtship displays. Feathers are evolved from the scales of reptiles. Feathers are made out of keratin, the protein found in hair and nails. Feathers have unpigmented base, calamus, umbilicus, shaft, rachis, and vane. Types of feathers. Quill or flight feathers. The quill feathers have a strong rachis or shaft having barbules with an interlocking arrangement. They are classified into three types. Remiges are the quill feathers which occurring on the wings and serving the purpose of flight. Rectrices are the quill feathers which occurring around uropygium to form the tail of bird. Coverts are the quill feathers covering the bases of wings. Next type of feather is phyloplumes. The phyloplumes are small, delicate, hair-like feathers which distributed over the body. Down feather or plumule. The down feathers are small, soft and woolly and lack the rachis but have a short calamus. Powdered down feathers. These feathers produce some powdery fragments for cleaning the plumage. Rictal bristle plumule. Some birds have stiff hair-like feathers called rictal bristles at the base of bill and eyes. Flight muscles. The muscle which operate the wings during flight are called flight muscles. The flight muscles are pectoral muscle, accessory muscle, and tensor muscle. Pectoral muscles are the most significant flight muscles of birds. They provide up and down movements to the wings. They are classified into pectoralis major and pectoralis minor. Pectoralis major is responsible for downstroke of wings. When pectoralis major muscle contracts, the wing is pulled downwards and forwards. Pectoralis minor is responsible for upstroke of wings. When it contracts, the wing is pulled backward and upwards. Accessory muscle. Besides pectoral muscles, the accessory muscles also elevate or depress the wings during flight. These muscles help in rotate the wings and to stretch or fold the wings. Tensor muscle. Three muscles called tensor longus, tensor brevis, and tensor accessories keep the prepatagium fully stretched when the wing is extended in flight. Worldwide distribution of birds. Birds occur on land, sea, and fresh water and virtually every habitat. They are distributed from the lowest deserts to the highest mountains. Bird diversity are driven by fundamental biogeographic factors. Birds occupy a huge variety of habitats and are found in extremes of latitude and land elevation. Majority of bird species occurring in continental region and remaining in islands. Birds are important components of the world's ecosystem. Environmental conditions of a country is shown by the state of birds in the country. The distribution of birds is uneven. The different biogeographic realms vary substantially in terms of the numbers and types of bird species they hold. Migration. Migration is the act of changing of habitat or resting place to another. The passage or movement of birds, fishes, insects, and a few mammals between the localities inhabited at different periods of the year. The periodical and regular movement between the passage between one country and another is called migration. The migration bird is a rule between the breeding area or home or the place of residence in stress of circumstances. Broadly speaking, all birds migrate, though the length of the journey varies in different species. Some species may have changes of elevation to a voyage almost as wide as the world itself. Many tropical birds, usually considered non-migrant, are subjected to short movements, the origin and the purpose of which is in search for food and safe nesting places. Countries in which migratory birds are found, departure and destination. Approximately 40% of the world's birds migrate, which means there are a lot of birds on the move. For example, black-tailed godwit, the black-heeled bunting, blue-tailed bee-eaters, white-stroke, brown-breasted flycatchers, great white pelican, calliope hummingbirds, sandhill cranes, common redshanks, citrine wagtail. Preparation of migratory birds for migration. Before setting off on their long journey, must prepare themselves. Fattening for flight. The process is not conscious one. It is controlled by hormones which subtly alter the metabolism of the birds, enabling them to store the energy they need for the long flight and build up muscles they need to undertake the rigorous journey. The amount of energy reserves needed differs between species depending on how far they fly in one go. Some birds will stop off on the way to feed, while others will undertake the whole journey in a single non-stop flight. Birds like swifts and swallows store very little fuel as they can feed while they fly. Most energy is stored in the form of fat, which is built up before the journey and en route with refueling at stopping off places if needed. Fat is an ideal way for birds to store fuel, and 1 gram of it produces about 9 kilocalories of energy. Weight poses a problem for migrating birds. As the heavier a bird is, the more energy it uses in flight, and therefore the more fat must be stored for the journey. Too fat to fly. Many warblers will weigh twice normal weight when they begin their migration and will need the most possible departure conditions when setting off. Most small songbird migrants are insect eaters and switch their diet to fruits in autumn. They increase their feeding rates, and the hormones-induced changes in their metabolism mean they are able to utilize the food more efficiently, converting the sugars into fatty acids in the liver and then storing these as fats. Those songbirds which feed on fruits will find plenty available at stopover points. Research has shown that birds will select fruits that have a high concentration of unsaturated fatty acids, as these are best for being stored as fat. Those migrants which require stopovers often use traditional sites which are essential to them. For waders, it will be estuaries, and for warblers, it will be areas with suitable habitat rich in insect, berries, and fruit. The rate of fat storage will be less than the daily loss during active flight, and so several days may be needed to refuel depending on the type of food available. How do migratory birds find their way? Environmental conditions for birds' migration. Migration of birds can be caused by the combination of changes in day length, lower temperature, changes in food supplies, and genetic predisposition. Other factors like shortening of daylight and increase of cold are believed to stimulate migration. They migrate to avoid suffering from thrilling heat or cold. Birds must remain warm to survive, so they migrate to warmer regions when winter sets in, and they come back when winter is over. How do migratory birds manage to migrate? This question still interests many scientists. How do birds manage this amazing journey without an atlas, road signs, or smartphone apps? More than 5,000 species of birds manage annual round-trip migration. It has been shown that birds use several orientation tools. Birds permanently know what time it is in order to know the right direction on the basis of sun's position. Of course, birds use their knowledge to locate themselves with mountain peak. They follow landscapes, rivers, or roads. It seems that some birds would find their way by following their sense of smell. Another tool is Earth's magnetic field. Some birds have a small zone in their brain made of magnetite, just like a small compass, which indicates them where the magnetic north is. Interesting facts about migratory birds. First, can travel as far as 16,000 miles. To reach their destination in time, some travel at speed of 30 meters per hour. Birds take up to 533 hours to reach final destination. Secondly, they know where to go. Migrating birds know where to migrate and how to navigate back home. They use the stars, the sun, and the earth's magnetism to help them find their way. Third, the V or J shape that migrating birds often fly is called echelon. This formation makes it easier for a flock of birds to see and communicate with each other. Fourth, fattening up of body. Before they set off on their long journeys, many migratory birds enter the state of hyperphagia, where hormone levels compel them to put on weight so they can use the stored fat for energy while traveling. Fifth, if the birds lose their sense of smell, they can no longer navigate. They won't be able to find their way back to their home loft. Sixth, groups from the same species sometimes follow different routes. Northern wheaters in Canada migrate in opposite direction to their Alaskan counterparts, following a route that is half as far but much more risky. Facts about migrant birds. Hummingbirds are the smallest migrating bird with an average weight of 1/8 of an ounce. They can travel at speed of 30 meters per hour. Their migratory path takes them across the Gulf of Mexico twice a year. They fly this non-stop, which can be as far as 600 miles. That's a long journey for such a small bird. Songbirds travel at an altitude as high as 500 to 2000 feet. Geese and vultures have been known to travel at altitude of 29,000 to 37,000 feet high. Some scientists believe that birds travel at higher altitudes to conserve energy with less flapping of wings and more gliding. Neotropic birds are a type of migratory bird. Neotropic birds are birds migrating from neotropic areas in Central America and South America. Neotropic migrators include northern oriole, the indigo bunting, the rose-breasted grosbeak, and the ruby-throated hummingbird. The Arctic tern can fly more than 49,700 miles each year, racking up more miles than any other migratory bird. Reasons for migration. When conditions at breeding sites become unfavorable, it is time to fly to regions where conditions are better. Migratory birds fly hundreds and thousands of kilometers to find the best ecological conditions, habitats for feeding, breeding, raising their young. Birds migrate from one place to another for the major following reasons. In winter, when food sources are limited in northern areas, birds fly towards south where weather is mild and food is plenty. Secondly, to lay their eggs in more suitable place and raise their young one due to improper and inhospitable conditions in their natural habitat. How do birds navigate? Complex reactions between a bird's specific organs allow it to accurately navigate across thousands of kilometers. Organs of birds that help in navigation. A bird's eyes interact with its brain in a region called cluster N, which probably helps the bird determine which way is north. Tiny amounts of iron in the neurons of a bird's inner ear also help in this determination. Most surprisingly, a bird's beak helps contribute to its navigational ability. The beak helps birds determine their exact position. Some researchers think a bird can smell its way across a flyway. This olfactory map would orient a bird to terrain and topography. The trigeminal nerve, which connects a bird's beak to its brain, may also help a bird assess its exact location. Researchers think the trigeminal nerve may help birds evaluate the strength of the Earth's magnetic field, which is stronger at the poles and weaker at the equator. Hence, the eye, ear, and the beak, along with the brain, plays an important role in navigation during migration. Initial migrations are on their own. Somehow, during the first migration, they can find their winter home despite never having seen it before and return the following spring to where they were born. Birds seem to have an internal global positioning system that allows them to follow the same pattern every year. Birds can get compass information from the sun, the stars, and by sensing the Earth's magnetic field. They also get information from the position of the setting sun and from landmarks seen during the day. Why birds fly in V formation? Anyone watching the autumn sky knows that migrating birds fly in a V formation. Birds are awfully good hang glider pilots. The linear flight formation of migratory birds are called echelons. There are two reasons bird might fly in a V formation. First, it may make flight easier, or they simply following the leader. Second, there are two more well-supported and complementary explanations for why birds fly in formation. One is to conserve energy by taking advantage of the upwash vortex fields created by the wings of the birds in front. Big-winged birds carefully position their wingtips and sync their flapping. When a bird flies, the air behind gets pushed downwards, creating a downwash, and the air towards the side gets pushed upward, creating an upwash. This produces rotating vortices. And so, the other birds in these upwash zones get a free lift. Therefore, it makes flight easier and a clear line of sight is maintained. Data of migratory birds in India. Back in 2007, a citizen science project called Migrant Watch started asking birders in India to report dates of first and last sightings of migrant birds. One such species of interest was rosy starling, which winters almost entirely in the Indian subcontinent. Rosy starling has a relatively slow migration from the northwest, gradually trickling down to southern India. It is a very distinctive species, famous for its murmuration at roosting sites around dusk. Pied cuckoo campaign do indeed herald the monsoon. Bar-headed goose is an iconic species in India. The Blythe's reed warbler is a familiar winter migrant to many parts of India. It has a huge breeding range, but in the winter, virtually the entire population funnels into the subcontinent. European rollers have a large breeding range, with the western birds migrating straight south and the eastern populations passing through India before making the ocean passage to Africa. Amur falcon famously fly through India on passage from their breeding range in China on their way to their winter grounds in southern Africa. Black kites move away from Goa and several other parts of the west coast during the monsoon and return afterwards. Duration of migration. Flight paths. Different types of birds take routes of widely varying lengths. Some round-trip migration can be as long as 44,000 miles, equivalent to almost 2 round-the-world trips. Others are much shorter. Some birds even migrate on foot. Many cover thousands of miles and move back and forth between continents. Activities of birds in a migrated country. The reward for all the risks in migration is that it allows birds to follow food resources around the planet. The plentiful fodder fuels a busy season of singing, defending territory, and mating. Birds are able to raise their young and fatten up before they return southward. Therefore, feeding, breeding, and raising their young are the main activities of birds in the migrated country. Factors for migration: more food to disperse their own breed to different regions, to protect their babies, to get away from predators, to avoid disease in warmer or colder climate. Birds migrate to move from areas of low or decreasing resources to areas of high or increasing resources. The two primary resources being sought are food and nesting locations. As winter approaches and the availability of insect and other food drops, the birds move south again. Migration of species such as storks, turtle doves, and swallows was recorded as many as 3,000 years ago by ancient Greek authors including Homer and Aristotle in the book of Job. The Arctic tern holds the long-distance migration record for birds traveling between Arctic breeding ground and the Antarctic each year. Timing of migration seems to be controlled primarily by changes in day length. Migrating birds navigate using celestial cues from the sun and stars and the Earth's magnetic field and mental maps. Nocturnal migration. The majority of land birds migrate at night. These include cuckoos, flycatchers, warblers, vireos, orioles, and sparrows. Most of these birds are denizens of woods and other sheltered habitat. These birds are not extremely agile filters, so need dense habitat to avoid bird predators. Migration at night has at least 3 advantages. Birds do not have to worry about falcon or hawk attacks. Second, the air in the atmosphere is usually less turbulent than during the day. Lastly, the air is cooler at night. A migrating bird produces a huge amount of excess heat that needs to be released. Most of the heat is lost from the unfeathered legs. The colder the air temperature, the more quickly that air can be dumped. There are more direct ways to experience nocturnal migration. Altitudinal migration. Altitudinal migration is a short distance animal migration from lower altitudes to higher altitudes and back. These migration can occur both during reproductive and non-reproductive seasons. Altitudinal avian migration is common and can also be found in other vertebrates and can be seen in some invertebrates. Characteristics of tropical altitudinal migrants include a high rate of frugivory or nectivory movement between lower elevation areas during non-breeding seasons and higher elevation areas during breeding seasons, or on a consistent annual or seasonal cycle. This last characteristic can be sex biased, as it is with dugongs, in which the males are less likely to migrate than the females. The white-ruffed manakin provides a good example of an altitudinal migrant by displaying all of these triads. Threats and conservation. Threats. Human understanding of bird migration has been developing remarkably slowly. Deforestation, the draining of wetlands, planting of non-native trees, the loss of areas to urban developments, and intensive agriculture are major threats to birds. Conservation. According to World Watch Institute, many bird populations are currently declining worldwide, with 1,200 species facing extinction in the next century. The biggest cited reason surrounds habitat loss. Other threats including overhunting, accidental mortality due to structural collisions, long-line fishing bycatch, pollution, competition and predation by pet cats, etc. Late Quaternary prehistoric birds are birds which disappeared in prehistoric and early historic times, usually due to human activity.